Okay, let's name this one Gamera and this one Gamera 2. It's the Kaijuologist, bitches. Welcoming back my Kaiju brethren and sisters for another amazing episode. Now, tonight's episode, I'm pretty proud of this, so let's see if we can get that on the camera right there. This is Kieran Ichiban Beer. Ichiban. I'm pretty proud of this because actually there is product placement all over the place for this beer in the film we will be discussing tonight, which is, of course, Gamera Dos, Advent of Legion. Bottoms up. It's pretty good, actually. Now, where to start with this one? Holy flapping fuck, this is an awesome movie. This is almost everything a good kaiju film should be, and it should come no surprise. Anyone who's familiar with the Heisei era of Gamera knows this trilogy is pretty close to impeccable. It is a standard. It is beautiful work. So let's dive in, because crap, there's a lot to talk about here. This is an elaborate film. I don't think everyone gives it credit for what an interesting and detailed, creative little film this is. So let's start off right off the bat. Let's get into Legion, the new villain introduced into the Gamera canon. Interestingly enough, the first brand new foe for Gamera in like 30-some years almost. But he fits right in. He fits right in with Daiei's kaiju villains, which, unlike Toho's, tend to be a little more comic book, you might say. They're pretty crazy elaborate. If you're familiar with the Showa period, you absolutely know we've got space sharks. We've got a villain kaiju whose head is just a giant knife. It just gets crazier from there, honestly. But Legion fits in very nicely in that he's an excellent villain. He's a very ambitious design, especially considering this film is a year out from Guardian of the Universe. It is absolutely insane how well they pulled off this kaiju. He looks phenomenal. Well, I guess technically, the main monster prop you're seeing is the Queen Legion. So, holy cow, where do you even start with this? One of the things I like about how it fits kind of into the Gamera universe, it almost does feel like Legion could slip into a Showa film very easily. There's a few traits here. One of them is the script doesn't ignore giving you kind of an interesting, crazy sci-fi explanation for the monster. The Showa period did this too. If you remember with Gauss, we go into this weird explanation about its skeleton as like a tuning fork. That's why its head doesn't really turn, and how it gets the weird high-pitched frequency for its cutting beams. With Jiger, we had that discussion about like the parasites and stuff. And actually, there's a scene in Gamera versus Jiger which is very similar to this one, where they're like dissecting an elephant, and you see all the parasites that are in the elephant's trunk. It's nauseating. It's disgusting. But likewise in Gamera versus Legion, to draw a comparison to a more Earth-based animal, I suppose, we have the discussion of the symbiotic ants with the mushrooms, and we even, switch over to like a school time educational series clip of the insects to demonstrate this idea of the Legion army, the colonies, and their bizarre nature of, and it is a very elaborate setup they give to Legion. I appreciate it. I'm probably not going to get it all right here, but the monsters seem to absorb silicon, and that helps fuel the flower to launch the next flower seed into space so that they can keep taking over and colonizing other planets. It's fun because it gives Legion an actual purpose. It's not just some bastard monster who showed up and is just here to fuck up the planet. But yeah, it's crazy. It's elaborate. It's not the soundest science, but at least they tried. At least they put in some effort here. Props to the screenwriter. The screenwrite here. I lost his first name. Last name is Ito, so I'll call him Screenwrite Ito from here on out. And then obviously our director Kaneko, who, holy cow, how he pulls this one out. The other interesting thing with Legion that feels very much in the Gamera universe is the wild amount of weaponry Legion has. Legion doesn't just have one or two attacks. Legion has a couple bizarre attacks, and just when you think, like, towards the end that Legion's down, suddenly it's surprised that one laser is gone. Now I have laser whips. That's right, now I have laser whips. You know you're dealing with a Gamera villain when you're using the phrase laser whips. So I adore Legion. It's a fun contrast to the other villains in the Heisei series. You know, Gauss is maybe a little more vicious or visceral with its violence, but it's still kind of a practical, animalistic aspect with Gauss. You know, they need to feed to reproduce. It's pretty basic. And then you get to Iris and Gamera 3, and Iris is such an emotional monster. It feeds off hate and anger and loathing. And then Legion is like the opposite. It is unlike those other two kaiju, it's almost no emotion to it. And part of it is that's hard to get a character with this type of monster prop, but it's not bad. I don't mean to suggest that there isn't character to Legion. The Queen especially, she's cruel, she's vicious, she is a full-out soldier. I mean, that's one of the comparisons that the humans are constantly talking about as they're discovering the Legion alien is they're built for war. They are very methodical, efficient destroyers of planets. And it's fun how cold and calculating and ruthlessly powerful she is. So anyway, let's talk about Gamera. Gamera evolves through these films, and at this point, he is not nearly as friendly looking. He seems taller to me and maybe lankier too, like a little skinnier, a little more fighting fit. But he looks tremendous. There's some nice new details on the arms going on. The flying sequences with him actually look pretty damn good. This film is starting to incorporate a lot more CGI than Guardian of the Universe did, but not poorly. It's rarely to the detriment of the film. But yeah, Gamera, you get such a awesome sense of his character in this movie. Arguably more so than the other two films. You see him just take a constant beating through this film. Almost every time he encounters the Legion, it feels like Gamera could be dead. And every time he has to fight Legion again, the stakes go up. Your concern for Gamera goes up. But this again is very much in the tradition of the Showa Gamera films. As much as we applaud the Heisei series for reinventing this monster and making actually very high quality kaiju films, Kaneko does not ignore the legacy the Showa films left behind. And one of them is that Gamera gets severely injured in almost all his movies. There are obvious wounds, there are battle scars. Gamera has to go and heal for a period of time. And we maintain that in Legion, but there is so much heavy-hitting gravitas to it. Like, you really do feel for this poor monster. And more so than with most kaiju battles, you really are cheering him on. So I guess we talk about the way, I like to categorize my kaiju films, with the exception of the very first Showa Gamera film. I think Gamera the Invincible. Every Gamera film's a versus film. It's all very much working towards a two-monster conflict, and this one's no different. For the most part, it's a very strong film for the versus category. My only real complaint, and it's hard for even to be a complaint, because if you've seen Guardian of the Universe, they set up this exposition that he's the guardian of planet Earth. We call him Guardian of the Universe. He seems more focused on Earth in this series, but he just kind of shows up on cue. And I do wish that there had just been a little more plot detailing at the beginning. Maybe when the asteroids are coming in, we see his eyes open underwater. Just a little hint to remind us right from the get-go that this is a film about Gamera. He is the marquee monster in this one. And it is a little strange to me that it's almost the first 40 minutes. There's very little, I can't even think of an immediate reference to Gamera. And then we're right away into, we're so focused on the Legion that his initial arrival is maybe a little abrupt. But from there, it's understandable. That's his job. If something's threatening the Earth, that's his job. He shows up, he kicks its ass. And from there, the action and the fight sequences, this is where, as a versus film, this movie excels beyond all expectations. Not only are the battles interesting, dynamic, exciting, engaging, but there's some really good tension to these battles too. The biggest one is about midway through the film, where you have the helicopter with Asagi and the other scientist that isn't taking off, and Gamera's trying to save the helicopter from the giant Legion Queen, but at the same time he has to go and stop the flower from detonating and blowing up the entire city. So he's got two different issues kind of crunching his schedule, his agenda here, on top of fighting the Legion Queen, who this is the first time she really shows up and shows what she can do. She blows a whole freaking chunk off the poor turtle's shoulder. It's gruesome. It's the kind of kaiju fight you'd live for. It's so well done. It's so exciting. So yeah, as a versus film, it's hard to find many faults with this. You get a great sense, like I said, with Legion, has kind of this cold, calculating, just utter machine of destruction kind of feel, and Gamera is your super protagonist. I mean, he takes the most violent beating in this movie and just keeps getting up and keeps going, and you can't help but fall in love with that kind of determination. So I guess the rest of this review is almost going to be me posing questions, because this movie raises so many questions for me, especially how it fits in with the trilogy. I've seen a lot of people comment that this film feels like such an outlier from the other two films, and that's understandable because we see a lot of the same characters from Guardian of the Universe show up in Revenge of Iris. Very few of them, with the exception of Asagi, show up, and our good friend, the security guy at the Kirin Beer Factory. Poor dude's in the wrong place all the time. But I trust Kaneko as a director. He is one of those directors within the kaiju genre. Things aren't happening for no reason, and I very much get the sense with how confident him and the screenwriter Ito are with this film, that they knew they were starting to set up, either it was a trilogy, maybe they were thinking it was going to be something longer, but I think this is the film where they are having to evolve this film series. This isn't a shot in the dark anymore. They know they have success on their hands, and there's something very methodical about this film. That said, I've been racking my brain, and it almost produces more questions. The biggest things that hang me up with this film is the imagery, and the symbolism. I guess the symbolism's the most obvious one. There is a shit ton of biblical references going on in this film. I mean, right from the very get-go of the film, the credit sequence opens to do the title, and it's a giant cross. Right away you're hit with the giant cross, and the cross shifts so that it's one of the symbols within Gamera's name, and written out in Japanese. But I mean, that's the beginning of it, and then obviously Legion, the name, we get the little Bible verse. The soldier says, I am no biblical scholar, so people can correct me all you want, because I love corrections, frankly. I'm sure there might be stuff here I'm missing, but as I understand it, it's story within the Bible about a man who is possessed by like an army of demons, and the army of demons collectively are like one demon legion, and it's like an exorcism in the story. His body, they're casting the demon army out of the body. It's a hell of an exorcism. But and that might be the most literal point of all these playing around with the Christian mythology, is that is Gamera's job. Gamera is very obviously our Christ figure in this film, and his job is to exorcise the planet of the demon horde, whatever that is, legion. And that works. That's fine. I can't help but think there's more to it. Some of the other references we get into, well, the Cat of Nine Tails. I don't think it's a coincidence that Legion's last final attack are those laser whips, and each one has the little hook at the end that's like ripping out his skin as it's piercing him too. He's basically crucified by the laser whips. And then also we've changed up Gamera's flying now. Now he has wings a lot of the time when he's flying, symbolic of angel wings, maybe, but I especially noticed after he's defeated Legion and he's taking off, we get this beautiful, very low point of view of him taking off into the sky, and because we're angling it such a way, his body looks very long, and you see the two wings, and it almost does look like he is a cross launching into the sky. Man, there's another one I was trying to hit off on. Asagi's hand, the way the little the psychic bead she has that connects him to Gamera, it explodes, and it doesn't just explode, she's bleeding from the hand, which again, another film might say, it was an explosion in her hand. I think Kaneko's too specific. I think this is another, like, a stigmata reference going on here. Now, the question all comes down to is, what does this do? Does this elevate the stakes for Gamera, putting him in this Christ figure position? I mean, the stakes with the whole movie are considerably higher than they were initially with Guardian of the Universe. We literally see a city blown up. It's a fantastic effect. The poor city of Sendai, I believe, eviscerated, and poor Gamera, he saves the seed from launching and wrecking another planet, but he can't save the city, and he himself is there blown. She's alive, but the poor turtle's half dead for the rest of the movie. But there is something interesting about this, that it's the level of self-sacrifice, and I wonder if some of it is them planning ahead into the next film, that this is the turning point for Gamera's character. This is almost the cross that is too much for him to bear. He can't do it on his own. He has to call all the earth energy, the mana, to him to release his final attack to end Legion. And that it's too much for him. It leads to consequences into the next film. The destruction of the bead seems to be very symbolic of him kind of having to cut his ties from humanity. It's almost as if the character had to make the choice, am I saving humanity or am I saving this whole planet? And if I'm focused on saving humanity, I won't save the planet. The interesting too, that final attack he launches out, if you notice his eyes, they go pure white for a bit. And as we know from other Kaneko work that comes down in the future, when a kaiju has pure white eyes, it's usually hinting at something darker, something even maybe more malevolent. And I think it is literally, it's not just the energy of the earth bursting out of Gamera, it's his soul. And I think that's part of the reason we see from each Gamera film, the character gets less friendly, the character gets more destructive and less concerned with human life, is because he is having to give so much into each battle that it's literally the character is draining himself. And again, how all of this ties into the Christian mythology, I'm not sure. I did have this thought, and there's a good review on Toho Kingdom, and someone else brought this up. so I know I wasn't just going crazy in my head. The anime Evangelion, Neon Genesis Evangelion, was released around this time. Again, I'm not super familiar, but I know I've seen enough of it to know it plays around with Christian mythology a lot. So maybe this was culturally just, for one reason or another, something that was big with Japanese entertainment. Maybe there's another trend here that Kaneko is hopping a wagon on or is commenting off of that's going on in this film, because I don't feel it nearly as heavily in Revenge of Iris. Yes, he gets impaled through the hand, which again could be a crucifix thing, but it's not, the symbolism is not as overt as it is throughout this movie. So I guess moving on to this discussion, one of the big questions I have is why wintertime? How often are kaiju films, or how often do they even involve snow or wintry environments? It's very rare. You know, you have the Arctic in Final Wars for a bit. Son of Godzilla ends with a snowstorm. It's very rare to see this, and it's interesting to me that it affects so much of the palette of this film. Again, like, Ishiro Han is another one of these directors. I don't think you should ignore his color choices, and I think Kaneko is the same way. There was very much a decision about how bleak this film is. There's so much gray and so much white throughout this film that it just screams at you. And it leaves a very different impression. Guardian of the Universe, Revenge of Iris are far more colorful films, so why is this one so gray? I do kind of have a theory that this, again, is tying into the Christian symbolism. When we think of men of the cloth, when we think of churches, we think of gray and white. We don't tend to think of warm, summery colors when it comes to a church. And this might tie into a larger theme of this film that they wanted for this film, that this is not just a kaiju battle, this is like a holy war. This is the Christ figure fighting off the demon legions of Satan, casting them off of Earth. Again, I might be reaching with that one. I'm extrapolating here. The other idea with this atmosphere is just to get the tone of the film darker. It's absolutely, I mean, you notice there's not nearly the comic bits you get in Guardian of the Universe. The characters tend to be more stoic, the human element. I think that's why most people don't really like the human characters in this film as much, as they're pretty focused. There's not a lot of fun moments in this film, if any. And again, the symbolism that goes into wintertime often being connotated with death. Nature dies, the grass dies, the insects die, and that it might just be a trick that it's something the audience maybe isn't thinking about or appreciating, but it immediately has you nervous, antsy, on the edge of your seat. You already feel like something's bad because it's wintertime. Obviously, you can find examples in literature where winter has other connotations, but again, I'm trying to place why the wintertime. It's so fascinating to me. But I guess maybe to run with the idea that the winter is symbolic of death, I think one of the stepping stones of this movie, as I was kind of talking about earlier, is the death of the innocents here. That now that mankind has had to face down Gamera, Gauss, and the Legion, it has become very apparent to this world's culture that they are going to be under attack, that they need to be prepared, and we see the military really make the decision in this film to support Gamera. They choose Gamera. They're not going to play the field here as far as which monsters, good or bad. They have no choice because Legion is so obviously a threat. But there's not just the loss of the humans' innocence. That's what I was talking about with the motif of death through this film, winter being symbolic of the death. It's the humans' innocence is dead, but Gamera's is as well. Again, with him cutting off Asagi, him having to almost rise from the dead after going through that explosion. I think Gamera, by the end of this film, realizes that protecting this Earth is going to cost more maybe than he even has, and likewise that he might be causing as much damage as these other enemies are too. That, you know, we got to remember Gamera was created to protect the Earth. That was his job, but he's connected to it in a very different way. And we find out in the next film that in order to kill the Legion, that created the environmental conditions to help the Gallus rise again. Gamera is in some ways his own worst enemy. I don't even know. I can say that 100 times through this review. It's a fascinating movie, and the imagery that Kaneko is constantly, if you were to think about watching this movie with no subtitles, maybe even get rid of all the audio and just watch it and think about what the imagery is doing to you and how you're feeling, it's a very interesting dialogue this director is having with his audience. And it's very unlike any of his other, at least his other kaiju films. I'm not super familiar with his work outside of the kaiju genre. So I guess talking about color palette and some of the symbols there, one idea I was playing around with, because I can't help but notice how frequent the color white and gray are, which are also the colors of the Legion. And the Legion, I've kind of discussed this idea, they're kind of cold, mechanical, calculating monsters. You know, they are like, their cell structure, what do they say? They're like generators or something. Like they're almost robotic, right? But we also notice that with the humans too, and all the labs the humans are in, there is so much white in these labs. Like, even for a movie of this nature, where you think, well, that's typical, it is stark how quickly you go from outdoors, white snow, indoors, white computers, white labs, white walls, and then the monsters white too. And so I wonder if there is kind of a nature versus science discussion going on in the imagery of the film, that Gamera himself is more earth-toned. He is connected to the Earth. He is the protector of Earth. And I mean, I guess you could extrapolate that discussion even to suggest that to some extent the humans are as much a parasite as the Legions to their planet. There is kind of a quick, sloppy message about that at the end. This discussion of we gotta preserve the Earth, be responsible for the Earth or something, but it's not a theme throughout the movie, so I'm not sure that's necessarily what Kaneko was going for here. But I wonder maybe if just the color palette and the way it adds that kind of dark, intimidating atmosphere complements Legion and adds to this kind of doomsday feel and just the cold bleakness that shall we say it again? I don't know. I love this movie, but it is a conundrum. Most of the films I do reviews on, I feel like I have a pretty strong sense of exactly what this director was trying to get across with their work and their style. And this one, it could be that it was just rushed and sloppy in some ways, but I'm giving Kaneko and his screenwriter Ito the benefit of the doubt here. I think it's all specific, and maybe it's a culmination of all the things I've been trying to extrapolate on. Maybe it's none of them. I don't know, but either way, I feel like it's very interesting discussion, and that's what I want this Kaiju channel for, to have these kind of crazy discussions. Anyway, like I said, I can't recommend this movie enough. I think it's kind of the best of both worlds for the Heisei series. It's more sophisticated and darker in tone than Guardian of the Universe, but it's not as, you know, relentlessly brooding. As much as I adore Gamera 3, it's an excellent piece of cinema. It does at times get a little emo for my taste. I like that this one has so much fun with its sci-fi flair. Interestingly enough, I understand this film, Gamera 2, did win a science fiction award of sorts in Japan, but it was controversial. I guess it pissed off writers, like traditional book writers. They said awarding this movie is the death of science fiction literature in Japan, which I think is a shame. I think you're doing a disservice to how much work went into this film, but, you know, politics, how that goes. The artist community, we're crazy. So anyway, you need a good kaiju film, pick it up. The English dub isn't terrible, obviously, if you can find the Japanese one. And if you really need a good night to laugh, the Texas dub one, I found it on YouTube a few months back. It is funny, and it is clearly a passion project for somebody who had a lot of patience and a good sense of humor. But it's a knockout film. Few kaiju films look this good. This film is absolutely an argument for practical effects in modern cinema. It's breathtaking, the number of just crazy money shots that Kaneko works into this film. Again, I'd say it beats out both Guardian of the Universe and Gamera 3. Gamera 3 has a lot of great shots, but it tends to hit you with one really good one and then wait for a bit. This one feels just like relentlessly in your face, breathtaking shot. You could do a drinking game off of this with Legion. Like, every time you're confused if you're seeing a really well executed prop or if you're seeing CGI and you're not sure which, take a shot and you'll be wasted by the end of this movie because it's brilliant. It's stunning, the work they pulled off here. So, all right, fans, that's enough rambling and speculation and half-assed discussion on biblical references. You guys have a good night. I'll be signing off from Denver, Colorado. We are the Mile High City, and we are getting higher all the time. Good night, Kaiju fans.